Can you self-diagnose mental illness accurately?
Ooh, that's a loaded question, isn't it? Regardless of where you live in the world, it is become apparent that the mental health of people is under attack. There's a few trending topics at the moment, and in a YouTube channel, Mental Wealth TV, we get people asking us very interesting questions. So that's why we're getting together today to address a couple of these really interesting questions, actually. What's the first one?
So the number one question from our YouTube channel is, can you self-diagnose mental illness accurately?
Ooh, that's a loaded question, isn't it?
It is.
Okay, so the assumption there is that you can diagnose mental illness accurately.
Full stop.
That's the first assumption,
Yes.
which we can pull apart in a minute. And then that you can self-diagnose. And I would imagine that the sense behind that is that maybe self-diagnosis could be dangerous. So that's interesting. That's a nice one. I like that
But I
question.
remember this question came up a few years ago when I was presenting at a conference as well. We were talking about in the workplace, how does a manager know if someone's presenting with a genuine mental health issue or if they're just putting it on for the benefits or the flexibilities that they might get. And so we started talking about the process of diagnosis, and I would argue almost all mental health diagnoses are self-diagnoses anyway, because when you go to the
that's
doctor,
controversial.
I know,
Yeah.
I know, but hear me out.
Let's start with the doozy.
This is what I said at the time. This is what I said. So when you go to the doctor and you say, I've been feeling this, I've been feeling that, I've been feeling something else, there's
Subjective.
no test that they can send you. There's no blood test, there's no x-ray, there's nothing. It's subjective. So the doctor makes a decision. They might ask a few more questions and maybe you fill out a little survey, but that's still your own opinion, your own self-report.
Yeah.
And based on that, the doctor says, yep, okay, now I officially diagnose you with anxiety or with depression or with whatever it might be. So that is always your self-report anyway. And there's certain criteria.
Yeah, but some people say, well, it's a little bit like diabetes. If you have diabetes, there's a diagnosis, and then you act accordingly. But it's not like diabetes. When we look at diabetes, there's some very specific measures that are not subjective, are objective.
Exactly.
Even if the person hasn't got any symptoms, by looking at the blood glucose levels, etc., and the different markers, they can say you are in danger of getting diabetes, or you're diabetic and you haven't got symptoms yet, but you will if you don't change what you do. They can't do that with mental health issues. There's no such objective measures. They're all subjective measures, which is what you were saying.
I know. And the audience was, I mean, it was interesting because people really appreciated that kind of perspective on it. At the same time, we want to hang on to something concrete. We want to trust in our doctors and the medical profession that, they know something we don't know. But really, at the end of the day, we're trying to, the mental health diagnoses are labels that we put on experiences to try and be able to talk about them and to assist. But they don't sort of exist for real in and of themselves as such. So,
but we're not saying here that a mental illness, a mental health problem doesn't exist. No. Obviously, they do exist.
Yeah, of course.
What we're saying is that the science around diagnosis for mental health issues, it's already inaccurate.
It's already tricky.
You can't.
It's complex.
It's complex. There's no objectivity to it.
Well, that's true. If you go to different doctors, mental health is a continuum from well to unwell, and somewhere in there's a line that gets crossed that you can say, okay, now officially it's unwell, but every doctor will draw that line differently, will understand it differently. So,
and some won't even go into diagnosis. They're not interested in that. And a couple of studies around the world have shown that people with a diagnosis have on average 2 to 5 years longer illness than people without a diagnosis. So getting a diagnosis can be really comforting for some people, but it doesn't actually help recover faster. It slows down the recovery.
why do you think it slows down the recovery?
Well, in some cases, it's because even the idea of recovery, people don't understand that you can recover.
How many people contact us and say, what recovery? What?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we go back to the question, can you self-diagnose mental illness accurately? I like what you said before, almost all diagnosis is self-diagnosis. When I look at my own history with mental health problems, in the past, I went to many doctors and psychiatrists and psychs, and they all had a slightly different diagnosis. And in the end, I had to choose one out of the lot. So kind of was a little bit, they gave me the diagnosis, but I had to choose from one. And I stayed with the one that felt more comfortable. But was that accurate? Well, if there's no objective measures, you could claim that if there are no objective measures, all diagnosis is somewhat inaccurate.
But we do.
Or you could say they all share the same level of accuracy.
The closest we get to trying to have an objective measure is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, or the ICD International classifications. But there's certain criteria and you can tick them off, but anyone could do that. And you can Google that now. You can,
and they're really
a lot
good.
of people do. They get online, they Google it, they go, check, yep, that sounds like me. And there's a lot of that happening. I think the difference where you've got an everyday person doing that versus someone who's trained in it is that there are subtle nuances that you need to pay attention to, because there is an amount, the degree of distress, how long it's been going on. There's certain, specifications that the professionals know how to make. Whereas if you self-diagnose, I think pretty much everyone would have something. And we're seeing that now. I think a lot of people, with growing awareness around mental health, a lot of people are too quick to jump to, I've got this thing. And instead of using that for, now here's what I'm going to do about it, they use it for, now here's why I can't do X, do Y, do Z, why I can't show up at work, why I can't perform at my best, or whatever the case may be, which is a shame, real shame.
Yeah. So I guess what's behind that question? Can you self-diagnose mental illness accurately? I would say, what is the aim of the diagnosis? Why do you want the diagnosis? Do you want to know that you have a problem? I think you already do know that. So if we put a name to it, will that make you feel better? Why? Why would that make you feel better? Is putting a name to it more important than moving on from it? I know what I prefer. If I have a problem, I'd like to move on from that problem as quickly as possible. Yes, sometimes we need to tell our story. We need a little bit of validation from another human being. That's where therapy may come in handy, or talking to a trusted friend that knows what they're doing. But, at the end of the day, we want to move on from the diagnosis. We don't want to get stuck with the diagnosis. And this is the danger.
And it becomes
sometimes
an identity. This is a big thing I'm saying, especially with, I have to say, especially with growing awareness, the younger generation, with new ways of looking at things, becomes an identity. This is who I am. It's part of my personality. And so it becomes really fixed and harder to move on from than this is something I'm experiencing, which is what it is. There's some emotions that I'm experiencing. Yeah,
it's interesting that you say that, because over the years, we were teaching people not to say, I am bipolar, but I suffer from bipolar disorder. I suffer from depression. I suffer from, or I'm experiencing this. To take away that identity. But now we're seeing a return to that with the neurodivergent. People said, I'm neurodivergent, as if that was a new thing somehow, a new identity that I can hold on all my idiosyncrasies onto, and that explains everything about me, which it doesn't.
Well, you can, the neurodivergence kind of sits alongside the mental health in many ways, but with both of them, what I've seen is now even more classifications within that. It's like, what kind of neurodivergent, what kind of depression, what kind of, there seems to be a growing need for people. We want to categorize ourselves and put ourselves in boxes for some reason.
So that's dangerous. That's from a mental health perspective, that's dangerous. From our own philosophy at the WMHI here, we believe in people being able to get better, not to get stuck in a place.
Well, that's what the evidence shows.
If the diagnosis is going to help you, is going to give you that impetus to seek help, great, fantastic. get the diagnosis, cherish it for a little while, but then get rid of it. You don't need to be stuck there forever. There will be people that will try to convince you that once you're something, you're always something. That's a lie. And it's not going to help you. We're all about recovery. We're all about helping people move on. And you know what? Most people move on from mental health diagnosis, from mental health, from mental illnesses, whatever you want to call it. They're not stuck there forever. I am living proof of that. I was bipolar and I recovered. It wasn't easy. I'm not saying that it was easy. It was grueling for a few years, but it is possible and it's worth it.
And
it's worth it.
You're one of many, you know.
Exactly. It's not. I'm not the only story.
There's so many people out there. It's just
hundreds
most
of thousands.
people don't walk around talking about it all day.
No.
They're living their life and moving forward.
Well, why would you?
And that's what
Yes.
the strengths-based approach is about. It's about how do I move forward, and we can all change and grow and develop and come through different experiences.
Exactly. So that was a nice question to pull apart. But I'm just wondering, I don't want to leave the conversation just between the both of us. What is your experience with diagnosis? Have you had some experience with self-diagnosis? Has an inaccurate diagnosis made an impact in your life? What have you seen? What has been your experience? And to the hundreds of thousands of people out there that have recovered, what is your experience with the recovery? Did you find the diagnosis useful, or was it better not to know what it was to move on quickly from it? I'm just curious to see what the people...
That's really important, because for people that are still in the space of struggling, it can be sometimes hard to hear that you can get better, but when you have others that are saying, well, me too, and me too, I've done it as well, and I've come through it, and that can help build hope, which is one of the important ingredients of recovery.
And that's why we're here. We understand that when you're in the midst of pain, psychological, emotional, and even sometimes physical pain, it can be very hard to see hope in front of you. But we are the hope. We are the hope. We will hold that for you. Okay? So yeah, I'm interested to read your comments, and we will answer them all.
Hi, I'm Emmy Golding, Director of Psychology for the Workplace Mental Health Institute. We hope you liked the video. If you did, make sure to give it the thumbs up. We have more and more videos being released each week, so when you subscribe, you'll get a notification letting you know when a new one's just been published. So make sure to hit that subscribe button and don't miss out on this vital information for yourself, your colleagues, and your loved ones.